So this is one lens that actually surprised me. This is a Viltrox 16mm 1.8 lens for Sony. And also, full disclosure, Viltrox did send me this lens for me to test out. However, they don't have any control over the contents of this video, and all the thoughts that I will be sharing with you are my own. So hi everyone, this is Jiggy, a portrait and wedding photographer from the Philippines, and welcome to the channel. And as a portrait photographer, yes, a 16mm is indeed not one of my primary focal lengths, but I always do love capturing wide angle scenes, especially when I am shooting a wedding, and a lens like this comes particularly handy. So I am quite familiar with the focal length of 16mm, but this is the first one that I've tried that has a 1.8 aperture. I also like shooting, well, generally anything and everything about photography, and something that I do love shooting is the Milky Way, or I like doing some landscape shots, and this 16mm is indeed perfect for that. And this particular lens has this really cool feature, which is this LCD right here. Now, this LCD is not really something new because I've had that in my Batis lenses, or the Zeiss Batis line, but there is something very different because of these two buttons, which I will discuss later. But of course, let's talk about the very basic stuff first. How is the build quality? How heavy it is? How big is it? Let's talk about the weight. The weight without, obviously, that rear cap and the front cap will be about 585 grams with the lens hood. Let's take out the lens hood because sometimes you guys don't use the lens hood, and it weighs at 558 grams. So this lens hood actually is very, very light. It's only about 26.4 grams. Now the size of the lens is, let me see, the length is about 4 inches and the width is about 3 inches because it does have a 77mm thread. Of course, you can see that there's a USB port here, a USB-C port here, which allows you to update the lens. It's also got weather sealing, and it is built quite well. Now, it's also got, aside from the screen here, an aperture ring. Now, this aperture ring does feel relatively good, especially for the price of this lens, but you do feel that there is something plasticky about it. Now, the focusing ring is okay, but I'll discuss that a bit more later. And again, 77mm filter thread, which makes it perfect for a lot of those filters that you want to use, especially for landscape photography. So you've also got the declicker here. In other words, if you don't want it, you won't actually use the clicking here. And of course, an AF and manual focus lens. Now, this aperture ring I do like because I do like changing my aperture values this way because I find that it's much quicker than using the dials behind my camera. Now, I'll install this in the camera later so you could see how this particular screen works, but you also have two buttons here. Function 1 button is basically your standard focus lock. Now, you've got a function 2. What does it do? Basically, this thing has its own built-in focus puller. What are focus pullers? Basically, you set one area to be in focus and another area to be in focus of different distances. And all you have to do is press function 1 or function 2 to go to that specific focal length. So what Viltrox did was really basically put this entire system inside this lens. This is a follow focus system, and this particular lens basically has it built in. However, just to be very frank about things, I use the latest and greatest Sony system, the A7R5 or the A7 Mark IV, and even the A7S Mark III that has amazing focusing. So all I need to do is really just tap on the screen and it's going to focus on that, then tap at another part of the screen and it's going to focus on that. However, of course, having the opportunity to go full manual and focusing on specific areas is indeed more efficient or more precise, and that's why I still find some use for this. And maybe this one was designed for the older Sony cameras that don't really have that quick autofocus system. Or of course, it's not just for the Sony mount, there is also for the other brands which might not have the quick focusing of the Sony system. Obviously, a Sony user here. Now, how does the lens perform? Surprisingly, actually, there is very little barrel distortion, and I got so shocked given that this is a 16mm lens. Now, it is also very sharp, and the colors are pretty good, especially for this price point. Now, the close focusing, it's about 27 cm, which isn't bad, but it isn't really mind-blowing, but it does allow you to get those close-up shots if you want to. Of course, it's got a 1.8 aperture. As I said, it's perfect for those low light situations, but the bokeh is acceptable, but it's not something that you will go, wow, the bokeh is amazing. But again, bokeh is only secondary to why you want an 1.8 aperture lens. This just allows you to have more light come into your lens, therefore allowing you to bring down your ISO and get those cleaner images. Actually, I've already talked about why this particular lens surprised me. It's because of this one, the focus pull. It's actually pretty interesting that I put something here, which goes to show that this was built not purely for photographers, but also videographers in mind. The 16mm lens is actually very nice for a good vlogging lens, even for a crop sensor, which will effectively give this a 24mm focal length. That's actually pretty good. Well, 16mm is better. That's why they built one for the full frame lens. Now that I have the lens installed in my camera, I can show you how this screen actually looks like, because it is one of the new features of this Viltrox 16mm 1.8 lens. It's actually a very beautiful screen that shows you your aperture value, whether you're on manual focus or autofocus. It also shows you the distance in which you're focusing. In other words, your hyperfocal distance. However, personally, this screen is indeed nice. It's an added feature, but it's not new. I've seen it in some of the older Zeiss lenses, the Zeiss Batis lines. And if you ask my personal opinion about it, if given a choice, if I needed the screen, I'd say, oh, it's okay. But if it's going to bring down the cost, I'd say, yes, remove the screen. But it's a nice feature since it's already there. But again, that's Viltrox for you. They just wanted to make a more premium lens. And for me, I think with this particular one, they succeeded. The images are okay. The colors are okay. It handles flare pretty well. It's got very little CA. It also has very little barrel distortion, and all for the price of $549 USD. So if you're really looking for an entry-level 16mm and that has an aperture of 1.8, then this is the lens for you. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, please do subscribe to the channel, and while you're at it, click that notification bell. Now, if you have any questions with regards to this lens, feel free to leave them in the comments section below. Now, if you want to learn more about off-camera flash photography, or maybe just photography in general, do check out the rest of the videos in the channel. Okay, till the next video.